I mean, how can you raise a child in a world where they televise all of life's misery and inhumanity and then pass it off as some sort of twisted entertainment?
The Hunger Games.
16 and pregnant.
The Hunger Games franchise is one of great importance to me. Back when I was a young lad out in the wild, I was big into fantasy, and there was never a time that my book bag didn't have a library book inside of it telling some teen sci-fi drama or a weird dystopian future. Now, this wasn't unusual for my age demographic, and I'm sure anyone watching this video that's in their 20s can recall books like Divergent, Hunger Games, Maze Runner, and a few more being hot commodities for the time. Now, while all those books have on-screen adaptations, now I'm still waiting on someone to take a chance on the Chronicles of Vladimir Tod. I know the whole adolescent vampire ship sailed long ago, but maybe somebody might spin the block for these books. Hopefully. I really like them, I really enjoy them, you should read them. Really good books. But back to the topic of the video. Now, while I don't remember too much from the books nowadays, there's still bits and pieces that enter my mind from time to time, and I have enough recollection to firmly claim that this series is one of the best, one of the best adaptations from a series of books. Keep that S word at the end of books, because there are some standalone stuff out there that's classic, but I do think it is one of the best series of books to film adaptations. Now, I will review each movie on their own, except Mockingjay. That one is getting its own review combined. Let me take care of some housekeeping. Number one, even though I've read the books, I'll be reviewing these movies without that in mind because A, that's how most of the audience digested it, and B, like I said, I only remember bits and pieces, so I kind of have an excuse with that. Also, since I'll probably forget to include this later on, I do want to remind you guys that if you happen to like the video, which is not right now because the video hasn't even started yet, but at some point, if you maybe have a moment where it's like, oh, this is a good video, maybe consider giving it a like, subscribe, help me out, help a little content creator like myself make it in the big city. I'm not even at 1,000 yet, so you know, help your fellow content creator. And I think that's it. So get your popcorn. I got my Sprite next to me. I know it's not healthy, but I like Sprite. Sue me. And let's get to it. Now, first up, we have the Hunger Games, the originator, the genesis, the creation, the incomprehension. So the first movie in most dystopian franchises are usually set up to be world builders and help the audience understand the world it's currently in and how it functions. Now, the challenge that can occur with that is making sure it's done in a way that provides all the necessary context, but doesn't feel like it's straight up reading the IMDb synopsis. Unless they take the narration route and just have a character do a narration of the world in the first few minutes, which I always take as a cop-out, but it can work from time to time, so hey, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. In this case, the Hunger Games did an extremely effective job of capturing how depressing this world is and how things operate. A lot of this was tied to the fact that our main character comes from the poorest district situationally, which I don't think was really explained in the movie outright, but if you assume that the lower the district number, the better the living situation, you would be correct for the most part. That's part of why they straight up train kids to enter the games at the lower number districts as time goes on. It's kind of like high school sports where prep schools allow students to just focus on the sports versus a school in a poverty town. That poverty town might have a good player or two, but that prep school breeds good players like it's 101 Dalmatians, so they usually win more than they don't. This movie also gave us a main character that I think most audiences can relate to in Katniss. Now, while most of us aren't good with a bow and arrow, other than that, there isn't much to make her some unique character. Overall, she just happened to be the right girl at the right time to spark a revolution that she didn't even really want to be a part of, let alone be the poster girl for. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so back to the movie at hand. Because of the fact that this competition is once a year and has a new batch of kids in it, we are also able to learn a lot through the lens of her and Peeta. We see how abstract the Capitol is and how all the window dressing involved with this stuff. Moreover, we also get a look at how out of touch these people are in the Capitol and how using politics in this world is actually more important than how much of a capable fighter you are. A key moment for me that stuck out was when Haymitch was walking around this shopping area and these two Capitol kids were chasing each other with a sword, play fighting, which to us in our world isn't that big of a deal, and you see it all the time. Or maybe not all the time, maybe only around like Halloween, but kids play fighting with each other, that's not a miscommonplace. But when you consider that in the Hunger Games, kids are legit playing an involuntary lottery on who goes to this event where you have to fight to the death and only one comes out and the whole thing is televised like this world's Super Bowl or FIBA Cup, then yeah, kids in the Capitol who never have to experience that but are pretending like they are is pretty unsettling. Also, the foreshadowing in this movie is great as well, like the convo Peeta and Katniss had the night before the games, where Peeta said he doesn't want the Capitol and all these things going on to change him, which hit pretty different once you see the ending of Mockingjay Part 1 and basically all of Part 2. You have Gale, who told Katniss all they want is a good show, which has multiple meanings in this world. You have the host of the Hunger Games show telling Peeta that the girl that he has a crush on, cough cough, Katniss, will have to go out with him if he wins the games, which turned out to be unironically true. And then there's the obvious overarching thing said across most of the movies, which is that nobody truly wins the Hunger Games. There are only survivors. Now, as far as the games themselves, I thought it left a lot to be desired, a lot of that being the culprit of a PG-13 rating, which prevented showcasing just how brutal these kids would turn on one another. But to be fair, they did knock some specific moments out of the park. The first one being the countdown, where we get various shots throughout the different characters we've been introduced to, and just seeing the different levels of anxiety they all were feeling as the clock was ticking down to start this Hunger Games. Then right as it hit 0, we just get this deafening sound of sorrow sweeping over the audio and nothing else, which I think was meant to capture that rush of adrenaline a lot of these kids faced when they realized that this is indeed not a dream, but a living nightmare. I thought the brief little montage of Katniss hunting and surviving off the land was nice to see as well, because it lets us know that if it came down to the last man standing situation, her chances were great, but on the same coin, us seeing the game maker intentionally try to sabotage her also showed how this game isn't just about who's the best survivor. This is entertainment, and seeing a girl just hunt animals and sleep in trees all game was not good television for what the Capitol wanted to convey on these games. The whole reason kids are sent in the first place is to show that even the most innocent humans, children, can be pushed to barbarism if the situation called for it. Barbarism, is that a word? I'm gonna pretend it's a word for this video. See, for President Snow, it's deeper than just reminding the districts of their loss. It's meant to remind everyone in Panem that without the Capitol's control, they're no better than the wild animals willing to tear their fellow neighbor apart if it meant their next meal. Now, outside of those specific moments, I would have liked if the movie was a bit more cutthroat in just how brutal these games could get. I think Jennifer Lawrence did a phenomenal job as Katniss. Josh Hutcherson, if you ever seen my Bridget Terabithia review, you already know how I feel about him as an actor. I just think overall there were great performances. I love the set pieces of the whole Hunger Games situation. I love the set pieces of the Capitol. They really helped visualize this world and helped convey just how dark it was, but at the same time just how strategic a lot of these things were as well. It's kind of weird to say the movie was shot in a way that felt like the world was strategic, but kind of did in a way. I don't know if maybe I'm just getting way too artsy for that, but that's kind of the feeling I got when I was watching it, and I was just looking at the different set pieces, and I was like, wow, this is actually like, this is just, all of this looks purposeful. Everything looks like it has a reason for it being in the way that it is. Now, on a grade rating, I'll give it an A-. I know that's a pretty high rating coming out the gate, but I do think it is a very strong movie. I think it is a movie that anybody can kind of sit down and enjoy, even if you're not into like dystopian stuff, even if you're not into, I guess, teen drama type stuff, which I guess this people just see two young actors and they just assume it's a teen drama, whatever. But I think this is just a strong movie, period. I think anybody can watch it and enjoy it, even if this isn't even your cup of tea. Like I said, it's not even that violent, so if you don't even like super violent stuff, I think you're gonna like it. I think if you like movies that have a lot of political commentary, I think you're also gonna like a movie like this. There's a lot of deeper stuff going on outside of just a competition where kids go into this arena and battle each other. It is a way deeper and layer-peeling movie than what it first seems like on the surface watching a trailer or something like that. Next on the docket, we have Catching Fire, the people and critics' favorite, for good reason. Now, this movie really peeled back the layers of this world and showed how powerful political prowess was. The game maker Heavensbee said a line in this movie that essentially summed the whole thing up: moves and counter moves. This whole movie emphasized that the entire world is a Hunger Game when you really look at it. Also, looking at it now, realizing this was the start of the revolution, or I guess the end of it, depending how you frame it. The start of the beginning of the revolution, I guess is a better way to describe it. It's nice to see all the breadcrumbs sprinkled throughout. Heavensbee saying Katniss inspired him to make the games matter, Finnick agreeing with Katniss that people seem to know her secrets before she does, Haymitch telling Katniss there are no winners of the Hunger Games, just survivors, which I just just said before in the last movie that I was talking about, and just the entire Quarter Quell game where it seems she's on the inside of an outside joke. Once again though, the games themselves lacked in combat, but on the contrary, all the traps in this game actually were more intriguing than anything we've gotten across all 5 films. My favorite being the Jabberjay sequence, only because how it's shot is incredible and it really showed how sadistic the games can be on just your mental alone. I mean, Finnick damn near looked like he was paralyzed after that whole ordeal. Also, to add a little book nugget, which I said I wasn't going to do, but I think this is important for what I'm talking about specifically, and it really isn't a spoiler, it was said that it went on for an hour straight, which in a movie I think it's only perceived to be only like a couple of minutes or something like that. Now, I think why so many people hold this one in highest of regards, the movie itself, is because it gives you everything you love in a dystopian film with a powerful government. It's got the intricate dialogue, the big set pieces, the anti-government theme, action sequences, somber tone, and last but not least, a main character that's easy to root for. Also, it's just paced extremely well, and the tension that was built up throughout the movie gave you this feeling that something unorthodox would happen, you just had no idea when or how. Like when I dragged my mom to take me to go see this movie when it first released, I vividly remember multiple people gasping and saying, "Oh shit," when Katniss shot the arrow into the sky and made the dome fall apart. And as a book reader who knew that was going to happen, I still was jaw-dropped because my 13-year-old mind had its expectations blown. By the way, I know I bring up pacing a lot in my movie reviews, but it's a very key part in how receptive people feel about something they've watched. Even past movies, shows, videos, this video itself, it's very important. For example, I can think of a lot of movies that I loved that were paced great and just didn't feel like I was watching a 3-hour movie, but on the contrary, I can't think of a lot of them that I loved that overstayed their welcome or kind of had that feeling like, man, this movie is still going on. By the way, shout out to them for churning out these movies so quickly. Of course, the times were different, but nowadays, even before the strikes and the whole pandemic and everything, if these movies were made in the 2020s, like if Hunger Games, the first one, were to release in like, let's say 2021, there would be like a 2 to 3 year gap between these movies. We would probably just now be getting Catching Fire releasing in theaters. It would just now be releasing, in my personal opinion. Whereas with this franchise, we literally got them 4 straight years in a row. No hiccups, just vibes. So overall, this movie is great. It is a legit blockbuster in every sense of the term. And it's funny because this might be the shortest time I spend talking about any of these movies, but it's a lot like your favorite local food spot. You really don't need to explain the food to people. You just tell them to go eat there and your job is done. The food spot will take care of the rest. Grade rating, it's getting an A+. This is probably easily in my top 10 favorite movies of all time if I really think about it, but I would have to really think about it. But I do think that you can stack this up against any dystopian book to film adaptation and it'll be a tough fight. So the reason I'm combining both Mockingjays is because you can't really talk about one without the other. Not to mention that they both are kind of doing the same thing when the climax or big moment of each one involves the infiltration of the Capitol. One is just about gathering support, then ends on a rescue and extraction mission, while the other is gathering information and then ends on an infiltrate and neutralize mission. Also, both of these movies are the weakest in the franchise, so I figured I might as well kill 2 birds with 1 stone, and yes, that was intentionally said. So starting off with part 1, the biggest criticism for me is just it felt like a drag to get through. It's a 2-hour movie that felt like a 3-hour movie, and a lot of that had to do with them spending a bit too much time on Katniss accepting the mantle of Mockingjay. And I say this as a person who read the books before this movie was even in production. Because while yes, Katniss as a character is a person who never wanted anything to do with any of this, I think if you were to cut the first half of both of these movies in half, let me say that again, if you were to cut the first half of both of these movies in half, we would end up with one movie that's a bit over 3 hours, which is a beefy boy, especially for the time, but that beef would have been premium, cut, and flow like the Nile River. But to be fair, these movies aren't awful. I think I should say that because I've been pretty harsh so far. I do think they captured the tribulations of war well, and moreover, we see how deep in our primitive state we are willing to go to ensure victory, even if that means making decisions that could haunt you forever. One of, if not the most unsettling line in this franchise was delivered in the beginning of part 1, where Finnick said he wished he and everyone he loved and cared about were all dead, insinuating that what's to come will be a much worse fate. I love the scenes with Snow as well, where we see him starting to slowly realize this is a battle that no matter what outcome will taint his legacy. Plus, I just love Snow as a villain, period. He, to me, even before reading and watching Songbirds and Snakes, was one of the more intriguing villains I've seen or come across. Not only that, but he captures it by not being some menacing, big, brute-looking guy. He does it by showing just how in control he is and how politically powerful he can be as a person and just how knowledgeable he is. And even when he gets ultimately outsmarted in the end, he takes his loss with grace and isn't begging for his life. A big thing he says is, "It is the things we love most that will destroy us." That statement applies to himself as well, because his love for order and keeping balance is what ends up being his downfall. So while these movies aren't great, I think they are capable films and at least wrap things up in a way where you can't be mad about it. I'll end with this too. The fact that Katniss had to basically win 2 Hunger Games, put on a fake relationship, be the symbol for hope, infiltrate the Capitol and evade countless traps, lose her sister, kill the new leader, and then be banished to her district to save face just to get a happy ending is certainly something when you look at it. It kind of showcases how in this dystopian movies, yes, sometimes they'll have happy endings, but if you look at the path that they had to take to get these happy endings and what the happy ending actually is, it's like, man, this is like, it's crazy. Grade rating on the movies. Part 1 is a C. Part 2, give it a C+. Combined, let's go B-. I'm just coming up with shit at this point, but I do think those are kind of accurate. Now we are on to the last but technically first entry, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Now I reread this book front to back the week of this movie release to refresh my memory, and as I'm typing this review up, I just got home maybe about 15 minutes ago from seeing it in IMAX. When I'm recording it right now, this is 3 days later after I seen it. My math is bad. It's a Sunday. I saw the movie on a Thursday. It's a Sunday that I'm recording this. So this is about as fresh and informed you will probably have me on a movie review in some time. And boy, do I have thoughts. Now, just because my memory can be shoddy at times, let me get my book reader elitism out the way. Skip to this part of the video if you don't want to subject yourself to this. There will be spoilers from the book and movie here. Not a lot, but I know people care about that stuff, so you've been warned. Alright, now that I'm here with what I assume to be mostly book readers or people that have seen the movie or people that just don't care about spoilers, shout out to you rebels. See what I did there? Let me start off with the things I disliked, which I guess that joke could have been a dislike for some of you guys, but whatever. The relationship between Snow and Lucy Gray in the movie was so horribly pasted, almost ruined the entire thing for me. And I know it's a movie, so I have to sacrifice some things, but with this book, I felt as if the one thing that absolutely needed to hit nail on the head in the film was the bond between the songbird, Lucy Gray, and the snake, Coriolanus Snow. I mean, it's only the name of the movie. It sucks too because one of the most intricate parts of the book is now going to be the biggest criticism of the movie. At least I'm assuming that. I had a brief convo with a couple who was also at the movie, and because it was a 3:45 p.m. showing, they assumed I must have been a book reader, and that was the one thing they said they hated as well as we were leaving out. And yeah, it was only like, spoiler alert, it was only like maybe like 4 or 5 of us at this movie premiere because it was a 3:45 showing, people were still at work, and it was at a movie theater that's kind of lesser known in my area, which is funny because it's like the only IMAX theater in my area. I know I'm giving you guys lore that you don't care about, but I just thought it was funny how like this 3:45 showing had like nobody there, and everybody there was definitely a book reader. But who knows, maybe that's because we know the grass is greener and people who don't might love the film's portrayal of the relationship, which I guess looking at the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, which isn't everything to go off of, but it is something to go off, I guess some people might like the relationship. Speaking of relationships though, I thought in general they were pretty weirdly portrayed. Snow calling Sejanus' brother in the book felt earned, but in the movie I almost said "what" out loud because I went in pretending like I knew next to nothing. Clementia was also thrown to the back in this movie, which was an odd choice to me because this film seems to present Gale as more sinister than silly, when in the book she's maybe about 60% silly, 40% sinister. The movie she's like 90-10, or maybe, let me not say that, 85-15. But like I was saying, showing, if not for a brief moment, how Gale basically covered up the whole snake incident and forcing Clementia to think she was abandoned, that could have helped sell me on this version of Gale. In fact, that moment in the book makes more sense in the movie because Gale in the movie is presented as more sinister. So showing that she actually did try to cover up and successfully did the whole thing with Clementia, I felt like it would have actually been a better moment. Like even in the movie, there's the moment where Coriolanus is going to get stitches after the whole event happened. You could easily slide in a little slot right there where, let's say, Gale goes to get some anesthesia or something, like she just leaves to go attend to something else real quick, and she says she's gonna come back to him. Have a moment where Clementia is like running away from the guards or something like that. Have her run up to Coriolanus and like have her just be like, you need to get me out of here, like nobody's visited me yet. Like have a moment like that that shows that Gale was doing some shady shit behind the background, but we didn't get that, which I thought was gonna happen since they were showing Gale to be more sinister, but it didn't, so I'm a little thrown off by it, but it is what it is. But when I think about it, Clementia in the movie was shown right off the gate to be a pretty dark-spirited person, where in the book she was presented to be a bit nicer than she was in the movie. In the movie, she like straight up took credit for the whole report. In the book, it didn't really happen like that, or it wasn't that hard of a jump cut. So I guess maybe this movie's version of Clementia, just her getting bit and then turning into a darker person, I guess it just really wouldn't have worked like that. Also, granted, in the book she was bitten by like 4 to 5 snakes and it was way more gruesome, and she also started growing scales later on, so maybe that was a budget decision. For the non-book readers, yes, you heard that right. If you like the movie, you'll love the book. It is much darker and the characters are obviously more fleshed out. Now to things that I love, because there are a few. Snow, I love Tom's performance. Lucy Gray, I love Rachel's performance. I love Hunter as Tigress. I love Peter as Highbottom. Jason as Lucky. John as Sejanus. And even though I have my criticisms about this movie's version of Dr. Gale, Viola did great with all things considered. Dylan Jury and Deborah Zane, you two did a masterclass in casting this movie. And of course, salute to the cast themselves, because I think they did about as good a job as you can bringing these characters to the big screen. I really enjoyed the film adaptation of the Peacekeeper part as well. That whole part 3 in the book was done just about as good as it could have been done in a film version, in my personal opinion. It did a good job of cutting out the book stuff that wouldn't have really mattered in the movie, and more importantly, it handled the ending pretty spot on. It's damn near a moment for moment straight out of the book. At least in the movie, we get to see that Lucy did indeed catch on to Snow's connivingness. And am I also coming up with that word connivingness? I'm acting like fucking Suzanne Collins. I'm just coming up with words. What the hell? Now, how do I feel about the movie overall? Honestly, it's a solid film. I definitely think it's better than Mockingjay Part 1 and 2, but not better than the first two. Visually, it's really appealing. There's a lot of really good shots. I already did my book reader elitism, but I will say the parts that I read and I thought, how are they going to depict that in the film? They knocked it out of the park. The performances were great. It honestly felt like every actor and actress cared about their character and wanted to give them good representation, which I applaud. While the relationships between the characters left a lot to be desired, at least individually they felt like actual people, not a character from a movie or a book. Also, for a 2-hour and 45-minute movie, it didn't really feel like one. It felt closer to a 2-hour movie, or maybe like an hour 45-minute movie. So kudos to them for that, because we are in a time where longer films are now the standard, so I appreciate when some cannot feel as long. I do think this movie will age better over time once people get over the fact that this isn't a Katniss story, and give props to the fact that Suzanne Collins took us somewhere nobody really expected, an origin story on President Snow. It honestly makes me double excited knowing that we now have a 65-year gap where she can basically pick any year for her next book, because it does seem she leaves a lot of mystery left in these games for future endeavors. For instance, the games that Haymitch won from the original, I guess, trilogy, if you count part 1 and 2 as the same entity, Haymitch won his games during a quarter quell, and his quarter quell, for those that don't know, it was double the tributes. So instead of a boy and a girl from each district, it was 2 boys and 2 girls from each district. So instead of him winning a 25-player battle royale, he won a 48-player battle royale. So like, just a story like that alone on how he exactly came to do that, I think would be kind of crazy. Of course, that one might be a little bit more action-packed, but something like that can maybe work. Probably more so as a book or something like that, because I can just assume those games probably went on a bit longer. But back to this movie, we get our answer on how the game started, who created them, how sponsors came to be, why a mentorship exists, why it's such a spectacle. They didn't explain it in the movie, but in the book, Snow is also the reason Victor Village is a thing, and why winners were able to live comfortably after winning, because he wanted the district's winner to be the envy of their people. It's actually deeper than that as well, but I got my elitism out my system already, so I'm being pretty vague about that whole thing. But that's also things that he came up with that they didn't really explain in the movie. We also get to understand the method behind the madness that is President Snow, and for some who hated him in the movies, which I assume is most, I think this movie will humanize him a bit more, and by seeing things from his perspective, you can maybe understand why he chose the path that he did. Now, me being a reader, I'll probably score this higher than some because my brain just subconsciously put pieces together that weren't fully explained whether I wanted them to or not. But even with that being said, as objective as possible, I'll give this movie a B. Had they paced the Snow and Lucy relationship better, it would have gotten an A- out of me, but thumbs B's the breaks. So there we have it, folks. That is The Hunger Games and The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, but that's also The Hunger Games, so I don't even know why I said that. I hope you guys enjoyed it half as much as I enjoyed creating it for you. This was a project that I was cooking for quite some time. It took me quite a bit to actually finish the script and all of that type of stuff because I just always was very nervous about putting out a review on this franchise that I love and a lot of people love, and being a book reader, you know, I know so much more, and it just was something that I was very nervous to create because I just didn't know how it was going to come out. But there we have it. It's out now as you're watching this, so it's for you guys to experience and you guys to feel however you want to choose to feel about this. Also, let me know how you guys feel about it. If you're a book reader, get in the comments. If you are a movie watcher, get in the comments. Doesn't matter if you're either or. I like both entities. Of course, I appreciate the books a bit more because everything's a bit more fleshed out, but these movies are about as good as you can get to bringing the Hunger Games franchise on the big screen, and they have been knocking it out of the park. And I will be very excited to see what Suzanne Collins chooses to do next with Hunger Games, if she chooses to do something next with Hunger Games. And I will be very excited to see what they choose to do with the direction of that afterwards. If they choose to make it a book, show, whatever the case may be, I'm game for anything. I'm very intrigued to learn more about this world. I hope people are also very intrigued. I hope this movie does well, so maybe we can get more incentives, even though Suzanne doesn't seem like the person that goes based off the reception because she waited a long time in between books. So at least in between Mockingjay and Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. So who knows? But until my next one, I will see you guys when I see you guys. Y'all take care of yourselves.